The topic of today's discussion is about the vomiting. In this lecture, you will learn about the vomiting, and this lecture is going to be helpful for everybody, for laymen and for professional students and whatsoever, whoever is watching the lecture. So it's going to be beneficial for each and everyone because I'm going to explain it in a very, very simple way. Well, you may get a little bit tough words or terms. Those are actually for those who are professional students or learners, and those who are just watching for the sake of information. They are going to be, these all are going to be helpful points for them also. So in short, it's going to be easy video. Let's get started with our first point, that is vomiting, with the definition. What is the definition of the vomiting? How we define vomiting? Very simple. If our upper GIT tract gets itself rid of its content, this is called vomiting. What? Very simple. We have GIT tract. If the upper portion of the GIT tract gets rid of, means whatsoever is present in the upper GIT tract that is made empty from the content, whatsoever is present there, means in short we can say if the food is present, so that food, this is our GIT tract or a form of, so whatever is present in the upper GIT tract that actually gets rid of, means the GIT is now free or is upon a kind empty. Before we were having a kind stuff like that, so food was available. Now what if the GIT is a kind empty, becomes empty from the content which was available before. So this kind of emptying mechanism is known as vomiting. Simple, what upper GIT tract gets itself rid of its content. It's called vomiting. Simple definition. Well, now let's come towards the cause. What can cause the vomiting? Food, the very prominent cause, an important cause of vomiting. Drugs that you take can also cause. Movement can also cause. Now first we'll discuss in this lecture about the food, then we'll move towards the drugs and movement in the next lecture. So now how the food is causing the vomiting? Simple. The food that we take will first of all come towards the pharynx, then esophagus, then stomach, then small intestine, then large, and then it will be excreted from the body. Feces. Okay? What happens if the food is coming and if you take a lot of food and that food is moving through the GIT and that causes an increase in the distension or in the irritation? Means if the food is causing the irritation to the GIT tract, so somewhere, whether the food is poisonous, the food is contaminated, whatsoever is wrong with the food, if the food you take in excess or if the food is contaminated, two things are here. Large amount of the food plus contaminated food. Anyone can cause the vomiting in us. What happens? So this irritation will be given anywhere in the GIT. This irritation can be given by the food anywhere in the GIT to the GIT. Okay, so we take food, the food will then irritate our GIT. So then what will happen if the GIT is irritated? There is a natural phenomena. If something is teasing you, you must take that out from you. So if the food we take that is irritating our GIT tract, our tract will automatically pump this food out from the body. So like this, then our body will become a kind safe from the food or from the toxin that was available in the food. Well, what happens? How this vomiting is actually taking place in the body? Simple. This irritation or distension that is actually being sensed by the sensory neurons, also called as afferent neurons. So they will give the signal, they will take the signal from the pharynx. Remember, this irritation can start from the pharynx, this can be from the pharynx, from the esophagus, so anywhere in the GIT tract, like stomach and small intestine, vagal, sympathetic, means there are certain neurons and certain portions from which neurons are originating. They are actually responsible to give the signal to certain neurons to start the process of vomiting or emesis, one can say. So what happens if the food is irritating the pharynx? From here the sensory signals will be given to the brain to do the vomiting. And the same case goes for the esophagus and stomach. Remember, regarding stomach, it is believed that it is the regarding stomach, not small intestine. Sorry, regarding small intestine, it is believed that this is actually responsible to give a very strong sort of stimulation to the vomiting center in the brain, or you can say it is a very portion that is responsible for the vomiting. We can vomit if the food is irritating pharynx, esophagus, small intestine, but in most of the cases, or in majority cases, this is the small intestine that is actually responsible to give the strongest signals to the vomiting center, and due to which we do what? Vomiting. Plus, there are certain neurons like vagal and sympathetic, so all these can give sensory signals to the brain. So here we go with our GIT. From here, signals will move towards the brain and our sympathetic system. So what happens? These signals will be given to the brain and sympathetic nervous system. Signals are for what? Signals are actually because of what? Because of irritation of the GIT. GIT is irritated. Now GIT has a kind of phenomena. Now GIT wants that please do not allow. GIT is actually a kind, you can say, telling to our body, please do not allow the food that is in me. So what happens then? Why? The food is actually either toxic or very too much. So the body is not able to take all this stuff that is actually present in the GIT. Then the body will start natural mechanism, that is actually a kind of emesis mechanism. It will push back upward through the mouth, that we don't need you because you are contaminated. The food will be kind of pumped out. So now what is happening? The food that was in excess or was having kind of toxin in it, that will stimulate the GIT. Then the GIT will actually send the signal to the brain, where there is a center known as vomiting center. So the vomiting center is actually composed of nuclei which are available in the brainstem. This is actually the brainstem, which is a portion of the brain where certain nuclei are available, and those nuclei are responsible to judge the signal of vomiting, and according to vomiting, then this will send signals via efferent neurons. So this is afferent, means they will bring signals toward the vomiting center, and from here efferent neurons will move outwards, and they will give signal to certain portions of the GIT to perform the action of vomiting. Now what is happening? First of all, from all these regions, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, from here through the certain neurons like vagal nerve and sympathetic nerve, signals will be forwarded towards the brainstem where there is the vomiting center available. The vomiting center accordingly will actually generate the kind of signals like motor neuron. It will then forward those signals to a certain portion of the body. So there are certain neurons like through the cranial nerves, like number 5th, 7th, 9th, 10th and 12th. These neurons are responsible to give signal to the upper GIT tract, and vagal and sympathetic will give to the lower GIT tract. So now these are actually the motor neurons. What is happening here? Sensory neurons are actually sensing. They are giving to the brain, and from the brain then there are certain areas being stimulated. So then what will be happening? So then motor neurons will be stimulated, and they will be responsible to give information or give orders to certain areas of the body to do the job. Like cranial nerves, they will give orders to the upper GIT tract to do its action. Vagal and sympathetic will give to the lower GIT tract, and in the meanwhile spinal cord will be responsible to give through via spinal nerves will give orders to the diaphragm and abdominal muscle to facilitate the vomiting. One can say in short or in simple words, to facilitate the movement of the food or content that is present in the GIT tract. So what happens is all these signals are given to the upper and lower GIT tract, diaphragm and abdominal muscle. What will happen? The vomiting action will start. The vomiting action will start. So as the abdominal muscles are contracted, they are moving the inside, and diaphragm is actually contracting again, and it is moving up the diaphragm and abdominal muscle. They both are actually facilitating the GIT tract to push the content present in the GIT tract upward, okay, in short. So the upward movement will be a kind, it will take a kind 3 to 5 minutes to move the content or the food from the small intestine, from the portion of the small intestine. So I told you earlier that we have certain portions in our small intestine, like there are 3 regions of the small intestine. 1, 2, 3, like duodenum, jejunum, ileum. So from the ileum to the jejunum to the duodenum, the movement of the food from the ileum to the jejunum and to the duodenum, the movement of the food will take about 3 to 5 minutes. So this will be the movement of the food. And as it reaches the small intestines portion, the very beginning portion, the duodenum, I told you in the beginning, the very portion responsible to generate strong stimulation. towards the strong stimulation for the vomiting towards the vomiting center. So what will happen is the food reaches the small intestine. From here, signals will be given to the vomiting center, and accordingly the vomiting center will then give signals via cranial nerves and via the vagal and sympathetic nerves to the upper and GI tract and spinal cord like diaphragm and abdominal muscle. So all these signals that are given for the emesis, then they will actually start. So like this, slowly and gradually the food stuff will move upward, and slowly gradually. So as it reaches the small intestine, from here the mechanism will speed up. So what will happen? Simple. Before we were having here the sphincter, people call it with different names. So here we have one sphincter, and here we have another sphincter: cardiac sphincter, pelvic sphincter, gastric sphincters in short, you could say. So the gastric sphincter is the upper one that is near to the esophagus, can also be called as esophageal sphincter. This sphincter will relax. Sphincter is a kind of wall, wall, which will allow one-way movement of the stuff of the food. So if it is coming from upward to downward, here we have the sphincter. If the food is coming from upward downward, sphincter will open to leave the food inside. So if the food, now in this case it is emesis, so the food is moving upward, so what will happen? This will open for the food. As the food gets into the esophagus, this sphincter will then close. Then there will be no backward movement of the food towards the stomach. So like this sphincter is allowing, or wherever you get sphincter in the body, in the GIT tract, those sphincters are actually allowing one-way movement of the food. So I guess the food will move upward, and as it reaches the mouth, so then what will happen? Simple. It is in excess, so the mouth, we cannot control it further. Then what will happen then? Then there will be emesis. One can say the vomiting will be observed like that. So I hope you got the understanding. If still you have confusion anywhere, feel free to ask us in the comment box, and I thank you for watching.